first of all, we need to understand what is the technical capabilities that this launch indicated. Okay, 2,700 kilometers, the distance, 550 when it comes to the altitude. Successful or not, Mr. Teng?
I should say it's half successful and half failed.
Explain, please.
For example, the launching of such a range at the range of 2,700 kilometers, that should be an intermediate range missile system. But when they splash into the ocean, there are some pieces splashed into the water, which means when the warhead re-entering the atmosphere, the warhead was broken into pieces.
I see.
That's not a successful test, actually.
It was not successful, but 2,700 kilometers, that's quite a sensitive number, isn't it? It could reach, if coming to a very different direction, the U.S. territory of Guam.
Yeah, almost reached the territory of Guam. For example, I think in the year of 2005 or something like that, DPRK already did the test which reached the east coast of the Philippines. Right. At the range of 4,000 kilometers. Guam to Korean Peninsula, I think the distance actually is about 3,400 kilometers. So the missile possessed by DPRK can cover the territory of the United States, Guam.
All right, we're making that technical details very clear. It helps us to clarify our views as well. Mr. Tangen, President Donald Trump did not overreact, quote unquote, with his rhetorics. However, he did use very unprecedented, some diplomatic responses toward what exactly happened. He talked about DPRK launching the missile against the international community and things related to that. Mr. Tangen, are you surprised by that response?
I think it was a prepared response. You have two Donald Trumps. Obviously, the one that we saw today was the scripted one. But he also said that all options are on the table.
That's
he
right.
repeated this. So this is feeding into the base that says, look, we're going to do something.
Right. On the other hand, Secretary Tillerson, which is usually considered to be a very reasonable diplomat, he said, we don't know that we were wrong. He was saying this, suggesting the earlier U.S. attitude to try to calm down the situation by doing UN sanctions against the DPRK, not try to further provoke rhetorically toward DPRK and provoke Mr. Kim himself. So how do you understand that? Another layer.
Well, that's another layer, but earlier this week he was saying that he was encouraging Pyongyang and saying, look, you haven't fired a missile.
That's right.
This is very hopeful. Maybe this is the start of something new. But, of course, today he did. So this derails a lot of his wind. I mean, he's looking as somebody who has suggested a course of action, but it has failed.
All right, Mr. Teng, it was Monday, which is 24 hours ago, that in the studio some of the other guests was talking about, well, we are entering into a very different period. Suggesting that probably a lot of behind the scene, under the table discussions are going on right now between the DPRK and some of the important players, including the United States. But 24 hours later, certainly things are very different. Or are they?
Yeah, I think there should be some miscalculations by the other countries. I don't think Teng Jianqun will give any compromise in the development of its capability in nuclear and missile. After at least three decades of development and research, DPRK has already reached the threshold, the final stage, to possess the capability in nuclear and in missile. I don't think Teng Jianqun at this moment can give up this program for negotiation dialogue. It's impossible for DPRK. So let's be more reality in reality.
That's right. We cannot just conceal our ears and say nothing happened. We didn't hear any sound. The sound is coming, and the crisis is ever looming. It seems with the technical capabilities of the DPRK growing day by day. But the question is, how will the others react and interact among one another? Mr. Teng, you know better than I do. There's division, and this time again, and at least in words, but further cautions, I guess, from China and Russia than it used to be.
Yeah. I actually, we are facing a very, embarrassed security dilemma
What do you
today.
mean?
For example, the DPRK will never give any compromise in this regard, and the United States will, to some extent, continue the manipulation of the tension in Korean Peninsula. And in terms of Japan, this time the missile just flying across Hokkaido, and Japan's response a little bit tricky. I think first the public. Now I'm sure we're very nervous about the flight of the missile. They worry about the security, but Shinzo Abe, the Japanese Prime Minister, might be a little bit happy about the chance for him to give more excuse to increase defense budget and to have more defense missile defense system in Japan. This test gave Shinzo Abe more excuse.
Could give him more excuse in developing
this
further.
This is another two layers.
Even so-called SAT system, because Japan has been talking about that.
For Japan to understand the missile test by DPRK.
Once again, it's no secret, Mr. Tangen, that different countries have different agenda when actually they are talking about the DPRK issue. We have a lot of different layers of issues. There's multiple issue of denuclearization. There's also bilateral issue north and south. There's also bilateral issues between North Korea and Japan's relations with its neighbors. Meanwhile, U.S. play a role with the DPRK, as well as U.S. role toward China, Russia. All these are more than complicated to explain just within 2 minutes. But Mr. Tangen, here is the thing. If we are saying we cannot just cover our ears as if nothing have happened, then what should we do? Are we actually doing the correct things? We means, quote unquote, the international community, Mr. Tangen. UN sanctions, okay. Maybe possibility for negotiations, or so-called all options on the table. I talk so much, but it is such an important topic that we need to think or probably rethink, Mr. Tangen. Do we?
Okay, look, China has been trying all rational ways.
That's right.
What you have is two speeding trains heading down the same track. And unfortunately...
China is not the driver.
No. On one side you have Donald Trump, on the other side you have Kim Jong-un. They are determined, and as I would agree with my colleague, this is not going to work. The United States will not stand for a nuclearized North Korea that has a delivery system.
What do you mean by not stand for? Nobody has explained it clearly.
I will tell you exactly what that means. That means that there would be a preemptive strike, and there's no question about that, and the American people will support it. They will not have a country that is spewing forth this hatred towards the U.S. with the armed capability to strike the mainland. It doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. Right. The majority will back that.
Here's the same question to you, Mr. Teng. Are we, having done everything we have been doing, waiting, in fact, for a bigger crisis to happen?
This is a really tough question for me. I think actually
I know you've been working on
we have discussed repeatedly on this topic. Any possibility for a war in Korean Peninsula. So I think preemptive strike might be on the table, but who can pay the price for such a war or clash, even a short strike by the United States against the DPRK? How about the retaliation from DPRK against Seoul?
Yeah. So what about the possibility for Washington to accept the fact that the DPRK has already got quite some capabilities, and also the fact that who could be able to afford the consequences of any military strike or any military conflict, even when it's a small scale? No one, right?
Yeah.
So what does that mean for everyone now? Should we focus everybody? Focus. What is the focus right now, Mr. Teng?
I think all the leaders concerned in this region are rational leaders, including the leader in DPRK, Teng Jianqun. I think he's a rational guy, and he's very clever. He's quite familiar with the manipulation of the situation in Northeast Asia. But this time, as we discussed repeatedly, the threat from DPRK has already become direct, real, that will hit the territory of the United States.
Right.
And when the security issue put on the top agenda in the United States, in Trump's administration, I'm sure Donald Trump might think about the possibility of the utility of military strike against the DPRK. This is actually a fundamental change because the threat is real and direct.
It is, once again, another no secret that all sides are planning for all kinds of options, but nobody will reveal their plan because it just isn't the logic. But Mr. Tangen, think about that.
No,
If something like that ever happened, what would this mean? I mean, for decades' effort,
you're talking
try
about
to reverse a crisis. Very briefly from you.
Look, the world is being held hostage by two powers who refuse to negotiate with each other, and the result will be a massive tragedy. I'm afraid that we can't get away from that.
Mr. Teng, can China do anything to make sure things are not going to that extreme?
Yeah, we still have a long way to go to maintain the peace and stability. And China, of course, has its own interest in this region. That is the peace and stability, which is condition for China's domestic development.
But China cannot be the driver because it is not China's
Maybe
brain.
someday China can be the driver, because the responsibility, the development of its capability in maintaining the peace and stability and the management of crises in this region. I proposed actually, last year in the newspaper that China should take more responsibility.